Welcome, everybody, back to the Christian Capitalist Podcast. We're so glad that you joined us this morning to discuss the intersection of faith, work, and generous giving to the poor and needy in the name of Jesus. We'd love for you to watch these episodes and listen to these episodes with us. And if you're interested in finding out more about the Christian Capitalist movement, please join us by clicking one of the links below. I'm so glad to be joined today by Jason Becker, my friend from here in Northwest Florida, who's a pastor, businessman, and father of three with his own podcast. We're going to talk about all of that in our episode this morning. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
It's good to see you.
It's great to be here. Good to see you again.
And everybody, we're in the conference room at our office here overlooking the beautiful Northwest Florida environment this morning. But boy, it's hot in here. The building's air conditioning went out overnight, and so we got a little fan in the corner trying to keep us cool. So we hope that that is a signal of the heat that's going to come from our conversation today.
I feel it cooling off already.
Yeah, me too. And so thanks for joining us this morning.
I'm glad to
be
here.
Appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about how you got here. You're a dad with three kids, a wife here in Northwest Florida. Tell us a little about where you came from and how you got here.
I'm going to jump as quickly as I can for time. But so I'm from the south side of Atlanta in a small town called McDonough, Georgia. Back then, we had 3 high schools in our county. You could, and if you missed the train, then you were late for class, right? Now it's got 10 high schools and it's grown up, and it's part of Metro Atlanta on the south side. But I was the 3rd graduating class of that 3rd high school that they had just done in the county. And that's where I met my wife. I was 17 and she was 15. And we just grew up together. And from there, we kind of followed each other through school to the University of Georgia. I was fortunate enough that her family actually became kind of my family. Because of that, being so young and being mentored so young, her parents were entrepreneurs. They were first-generation garbage haulers. They started with 1 truck, 500 customers in our little county. And so then when I came back to school and I was doing different things in the business world after graduating from the University of Georgia, her dad said, "Look, I want you to retire me." And so I came on with him, and he had about 10,000 customers at that time.
Whoa.
Which I thought was huge. And they were doing great, and his business was growing. So over time, my wife and I ended up taking over the business. We ran it for about a decade ourselves, by ourselves. And then we exited that company. When we exited, we were over 100,000 customers. We were the largest family-owned, or one of the largest family-owned sanitation companies in the Southeast, and the largest private residential hauler in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
And so it was really good. Great time to exit, too, in 2008, 2009. So I had cash on hand. We jumped right into the real estate market, started buying up homes and residential homes. Some of them we fix, some of them we rent. We have a whole portfolio we rent still today. We bought apartment complexes and college town properties and things of that nature as well. And so we were kind of across kind of the southeast area doing all of that. I tell people after we sold the business and we found another revenue stream and we got involved in real estate, growing our portfolio, Jesus broke my golf game. Yeah, so I got everything set up. I was playing golf 4 or 5 days a week. I got my handicap to like a plus 10, which is
that's
not
really
bad.
good.
It's like maybe plus 10, plus 7, plus 10, plus 7, right in there, plus or minus some. And I found that life just wasn't all about me. And I started seeing those around me that were in pain, some physically, some mentally, some in hunger pains physically, and some in mentally. Yeah. And I always felt a heart for people that didn't know a Jesus that I knew. And so at any rate, decided to start working inside ministries, thinking that I would help them grow. I was in a church. I was planted at a church that I had become an elder of the board and the chair of the board and secretary of the board and so on. And kind of rotated out of that a little bit as we sold our business. But then when Jesus broke my golf game, I said, "Hey, can I help you?" They were planting campuses, satellite campuses. I said, "Can I help you look at the business side of things, help you explore the contracts and figure out the cost and run the numbers and make good, better business decisions doing this?" And so in that process, I helped them plant. And one of the churches I was planting is in a place called Little Five Points. And in that Little 5 Points area, we walked into a theater right beside Variety Playhouse, which is still there. It's a place called 7 Stages Theater, which is completely run by the LGBTQ plus community. At the time, I didn't really know this, but I walked in. They had a coffee shop next to the theater, and it said in bubble letters in the coffee shop on the window said the words adultery. I looked at the pastor that I was hanging out with that we were planting for that church, and I said, I don't know about you, but this is exactly where Jesus wants us. Exactly where we're supposed to be. The manager of the theater came, walked us through, showed us all of the different spaces that they had. And he said, look, I've got some issues that we don't want to be offensive to you. We have some plays that sometimes can be very out there. And they said, look, we can work through all of that. In fact, that's kind of what I think we're building here is a church for people who don't like church. And I said, but he at the end, he says, I can do all of this stuff for you, but I have one major issue. And I said, what's that? He said, well, and I hate churches. And I said, me too. I said, me too. So I said, we're not the soapboxes. So I have so many incredible stories from that time. What ultimately happened as I was going through all of that, I started really training in pastoral counseling. I started doing a lot of theological stuff. I wasn't so much seminary, but there were a lot of biblical classes I took online through seminary at DTS and through places like Liberty and places of that nature. And so I went in and started, taking some coursework and got into this study of just, I guess, thinking maybe I'll work inside ministry a little bit deeper. The pastor that was going to be planted there really was called back to the main campus and just couldn't, it just wasn't going to fit really. And I couldn't leave. I fell in love with the people, and so I tell everybody I'm a default pastor. And I gave all my I don't pastor a church now. I don't currently do any of that. And so when I ended up walking from that church, we had some different things that happened, and it just became where there's certain business things that were happening for me, and just the time had run out there. Yeah. And we ultimately decided to move to the Emerald Coast, and so. When I came down here, I had to focus on some businesses that we had going on, things that were happening there. But I probably did that for 4 years or so, something of that nature. And it was a tremendous amount of time. Some of the biggest blessings I had.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. And the businesses that y'all own now, are they here, Atlanta, or both?
A little bit of both. I mean, so I kind of say I'm in a pie chart of my business. So I do have a portfolio that's still real estate. And so I own property here. Some of it I rent, some of it I'm holding. I own property all across the Southeast. Most of that I am renting continually. I do have some projects that I'm working on, but that's part of it. Then I have equities that I give, I usually give guys a lot smarter than me watching certain things and understanding. We have lots of conversations with those guys, to understand where my thought process, my appetite for risk, and where I think it needs to be placed. So they handle a lot of that equity portion of my portfolio. And then the third portion is venture capital.
Gotcha.
So I love to find great entrepreneurs with great ideas that can,
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. I love that. Me too.
Yeah.
So having said that, I hope you have another couple of hours because I got a million questions for you.
That's great.
No, I'm kidding, man. But Jason, that's fantastic experience. I love it. And for a podcast and a movement that focuses on the freedom of entrepreneurship,
sure,
and the ability to make a lot of money,
sure,
being the master of your own fate when it comes to business. I also want to talk with you as we go through each of these different parts of your current portfolio now.
Sure.
Going back to the solid waste company that you and your wife got from your father-in-law, about where God fits into all that.
Yeah.
Because part of our message is, hey, when you're in business, you're glorifying God through your work. So let's go back to when you're going to the University of Georgia. Because I should say, our audience includes people who are in high school and college, all the way to people who are retired and in their 70s and 80s. It's just fantastic. When you're at the University of Georgia and you're thinking about, what am I going to do after I graduate? You and I were talking earlier about a couple of the kids in our families who are either recent graduates or deciding what they want to do after college. What kind of thoughts did you have about business, and was entrepreneurship on your radar at that time?
I think entrepreneurship was on my radar, in part because of my father-in-law. My parents were hard workers, and both retired now, but they were hard workers, but they worked for someone else. So initially, I would say coming up, my goals were probably a lot like other kids' goals, right? I want to be a police officer, a fireman, or something of this nature. And then it maybe turns into something slightly more grandiose, and maybe say I want to go into sales, or I want to do something different. So But I think an FBI agent popped up on my radar one time. I told people that I wanted to be. So
Cool.
a lot of it, though, was this idea. Some of it was in service. I think that was probably on my heart and has been on my heart to a degree. But I never thought, though, that I could have freedom for, just whatever I wanted to do. And really the freedom for me isn't even about, and this is something I think my father-in-law was so great in instilling, is that the freedom and the luxury of even when we exit our company. I mean, I remember he looked at me when we exited our company. He said, "You're going to have so much more freedom." And he said, "Here's what I'm talking about." And it was the freedom to be a father. My son was like 5, 6 years old maybe when we sold that company.
Yeah.
He said, you are going to be able to pass a legacy that I wasn't able to quite pass down.
Because he was working so hard on the business.
Focused on the business. Yeah. You're now going to have even more freedom. So, and I have worked hard on businesses, but I have had absolutely more freedom. We take better vacations. We take longer vacations. I'm able to be at the home much more. And so while, yes, my thoughts can be pulled into other ventures we're doing, there's times and periods in my life that I've had to focus even more on business, and especially in the venture capital world. But when my wife does a really good job of setting up family vacations and spring breaks and fall breaks and winter breaks and all these things, especially as our kids were all in the home growing up in middle and high school. And we had all these times and these trips where we could set our phones down and focus on each other.
Isn't that cool?
And that's the freedom really that comes with entrepreneurship. But I didn't really understand that when I was young at Georgia. So I had it on the brain, but everything, success at that time for me was all about money. Now, success is about time.
It's so interesting you say that, because earlier this morning we were talking about the theme, or you were reading about the theme of the book, which is Paul's letter to Timothy, saying, hey, it's not about being rich now.
No.
It's about building the future and being ready to share in what you have been given.
Sure.
Let me take a quick sidestep to that time back at the University of Georgia. What's your wife's name?
Danielle.
Danielle. When you and Danielle were at the University of Georgia, because we, the Christian Capitalist Movement, are starting this summer and fall, and really have already started kind of building the framework for college clubs, Christian Capitalist college clubs.
Great.
Where we're focusing on 2 things. Number 1, teaching these students to be better Christians in business.
Yep.
And number 2, teaching them about how not to be afraid to say you're a Christian when you're in business.
That's great. Yeah.
So when you're at University of Georgia, how is your faith working when you're studying and as you think about your kind of postgraduate plans? In other words, were you thinking, hey, you know what, my faith's really important to me, I want to carry this out into business? Or is it still kind of 2 separate thought processes at the time?
Yeah, definitely 2 separate thought processes, but I think it's even less. I mean, I think I was somewhat of a cliche in college where I didn't really practice my faith a whole lot. Mm. And, there were moments that I certainly did. There was a period of time while my wife was still in high school. I actually started my first 2 years at Georgia State University, downtown Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And there was a time I met some people on campus that were doing a Bible study. And it turns out they were in the International Church of Christ. So it was really already classified as a cult, but I didn't know it. So I thought, man, I really do want to know my faith more and explore it. I'm not living the way I should. I'm like every kid that's being a hellion at 18, 19 and making poor decisions. Wish I hadn't. I wish I said no to more of those Friday and Saturday nights, right?
Right.
But those would be regrets I might have now, but ultimately, it really wasn't until I think, and it wasn't that, certainly when we were getting married and early in our first years, I think, again, it was just solely focused on business. Yeah. So faith didn't really interact in that world for me. Yeah. It probably wasn't until I had my son that faith was brought back into me, because then there was a spiritual moment. There's handfuls of time that Jesus and the presence of the Holy Spirit really, really just feels poured out in my life, right? Yeah. The birth of my children.
That'll do it.
Are one all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that at that moment, there was absolutely a prick on my heart again to say, hey, you know Jesus, you know who he is. You're not doing you're not living for him. You're not doing things for Jesus. You're not having a relationship really with Jesus. Yeah. But it's so important, and you certainly want your son to know it.
Exactly.
Right?
You want to pass it on to the next generation.
And that's really what, he brought me back. Yeah, Jesus brought me back, but he used my son to do it.
Because you want to lead by example and
100%.
have your child enjoy this relationship with the Lord through Jesus.
Well, you know how great it can be.
Yeah.
You know the happiest moments of your life and the clearest thinking moments of your life is when you're in a complete relationship with Jesus.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what? And so now you're working with your father-in-law, and you're learning the business,
Sure.
solid waste disposal.
Yeah.
And
I used to call him Little Hitler, but yeah.
By the way, I got to tell you, because we live on the Emerald Coast now.
That was giving Hitler too much credit some days. So he was a blessing. He was a blessing to have. He just was hard.
I remember one of my favorite commercials of all time, because I used to drive around a lot. I'm a retired healthcare lawyer. We go to hospitals and clinics all over the South, and you get AM radio wherever you are. One of my favorite radio shows on Monday night would be the Saints breaking down the previous game, hosted by Bobby Hebert, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, here's what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Drew Brees was big in those days for the Saints. Anyway, I could pick up that AM channel even over in rural Georgia as I'm driving around. And one of the sponsors of the whatever it was, the Saints post-game breakdown show was River City Parish Disposal.
That's right.
So and they'd say our business. It was great, but they would go, we'll come be your private waste hauler. We do all this kind of stuff. And their motto was, our business stinks, but it's picking up.
That's right. That's
great.
So ours was let's talk trash.
Who knew that there were so many puns to be had?
That's right. Well, it's an incredible business because really it's kind of recession-proof, right? It's really become a bill, just like power and water and electricity. You got to have your garbage picked up. It's a commodity too that people have to have it taken away, and they don't care what you do with it. So you don't really have any lost deliverables or anything of that nature, and you can understand it. The customer service side of it can be pretty hectic. You wouldn't think anybody calls the waste management company, but we had tons of phone calls. So we had an entire call center, and we had to learn. We were running. At the end of the day, we had 2 locations, and I think we had 2 different call centers, and we were running about 15 people or so in the call center.
Wow.
So
how many trucks?
So we were doing over about 60 pieces of equipment, maybe 70 pieces of equipment, over 100 employees.
And that's something, big company.
So we were the first to automate too. Our county's just automated down here recently.
Really?
So you live in Sandestin, where they come by your house every day in a bag of trash. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, it is.
But I live out on the bay. It's bougie. That's right. I live out on the bay. They come twice a week, and I have a 95-gallon rolled container to the curb, just like most of America. And but a truck comes by with an arm and grabs it, automated, and then dumps it. They just started that in May of 2025. Okay. I was the first to do it on the southeast coast in like 2007.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So it's old technology. I'm sitting here like, this is cool.
It's brand new technology, old technology, right? And we, because of that, I think it helped us to elevate our assets and elevating our price and exposure to the market. And I think that's why some of these big national haulers came knocking. We were featured in big magazines saying you've retooled residential routes to get rid of the guys on the back.
Which is safer, less expensive.
I can pay my drivers more. Yeah. There's less waste that would hit the streets. The truck's a little bit more compact. And there's so many different things
that's cool.
Environmentally, it was even better.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this podcast. If you could, looking back, give us a couple of factors that allowed you to 10x that business, right? So you got it with 10,000 customers, sold it with 100,000.
Yeah, right.
What are some factors that led you to be able to grow it like that?
People, for sure. I mean, having really great people and investing in people. And it's the hardest thing to do because it's so much easier to buy software. But it's so hard to invest in people. And the only way to invest is the tried and true time with somebody. If you want somebody to think like you, you've got to put time in with them to think so that they think and start making decisions like you would make. And so that was the biggest thing we did. We did a lot of training. We did constant training with our people, from the guys on the truck all the way to the men and women in the office. We did a lot of training and a lot of work and a lot of prep, and we just hired really well. And if we ever had to let go of somebody, or they left us and they went to another company, that other company was better for that person.
Yeah, don't you know? And
our people were hired straight on. So if somebody got upset, or I'll give you a story. We had a driver, 7-year driver, one of my best drivers. One of my top drivers, got popped for a drug test. We're a drug-free workplace. I remember I used to get the list in the morning. It was all random. And my manager would say, here's our list. And I knew this guy because he'd been there 7 years. I didn't know every driver, but I knew this one. Mm-hmm. And I said, Randy will never, I'm not worried about him. The other two, I don't know. We'll see what happens, right?
Right.
Goes, he gets popped for cocaine.
Oh, no.
Not something that you get secondhand, right? There's just no real excuse. It gets popped. We have zero tolerance policy. It's how we help on our insurance rates, different things of that nature. And I live and work in that community, so
you can't have that.
So I told him. He said, Jason, so I didn't even do it. He had all these excuses, and he said, I can take another one today, and I said, I'm sorry. Like, you can come back in like 90 days. We can retest. We'll try. It pains me to have to let somebody go, and he's pleading with me. And like I said, I knew him. He came into my office to plead with me, and I was like, there's nothing I can do. This is something
zero tolerance is zero tolerance.
Well, and I have to hold this company accountable to certain standards. And so fast forward, 90 days later, he gets a job at a competitor, and he's their best driver they'd ever had.
Sure.
And maybe he never makes that mistake again. Maybe he's cleaner. Maybe he's whatever. He passed a drug test, whatever it is. But I hated it for me. I had to hold it accountable. There had to be accountability there for the rest of everybody else that's watching too, right? Sure.
Exactly. Because they see that slide and they'll think
I can do it too.
Right.
I can make poor judgment. I can do something. I can cut the corner a little bit. So people is a big process in how I make it. The other would be systems. Systems is the next biggest thing. I mean systems from everything. We used to say that you'd ask 4 questions in every area of business. My father-in-law started with 3. I added the 4th one because I felt like people couldn't handle just going at the 3. And the 3 were what's right, what's wrong. Well, actually, it's what's wrong, how do I fix it and start over. I added what's right. Because if you started with everybody with what's wrong, this defensive nature and all this, that's just human nature for everyone. So I used to say, hey, you're doing a great job here. You're doing a great job here. I love what you're doing here. By the way, let's talk about here, though.
What's right? What's wrong?
How do you fix it?
How do you fix it?
And then start over.
Yeah.
And most people don't do the last one, which is start over.
Yeah.
So they get it fixed, and then they go on. You always have to come back to every area. So if it's in accounting, what's right? What's wrong? How do we fix it? And start over. If you're in the maintenance part of it, okay, we look at, and then I break that down: tires, hoses, hydraulic, whatever it breaks, whatever it was, and I say what's right, what's wrong, how do you fix it? Start over. Customer service, whatever, sales, marketing, whatever it was, those were the areas, and we break those into cores, and we have systems of checks and balances to make sure that we're constantly improving, constantly getting better. And those systems were big. So it's people and
That's
systems.
Awesome. So you got these great people, you got these great systems. Yeah. I can tell just from the way they're talking about it, you are building a culture in this company
100%.
Of accountability, and without even going too far down the road, I'm sure that included top-notch customer service.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's how you grow
ultimately,
a business in the service industry.
Ultimately, that's the only thing that mattered. I remember I had a manager one time, they were talking to somebody, and they were not handling this call well. And I could hear it in their tone. I didn't even see it. I could hear it in the tone. I walked in. They got off the call. I ended up calling the customer back and making it right. But they got off the phone and said, why did you talk to them? They said, well, they're a non-payer. And I said, well, were they calling to pay? And they were like, yeah. I said, but if it ends in them paying me, then you can take the non away. I don't care if it's late. I don't care if it's dirty. I don't care if the money comes in, pennies.
Right.
We take it, and we treat them like they are the gold standard that they are, that they are this precious commodity, because they are. I mean, we were operating in counties that could have anywhere from 18 different competitors at any given time, because it was free market. I had areas along I-85 in Atlanta that I had all the city contracts.
I was going to ask you about that. So municipal contracts, totally different.
Totally different ballgame. But in the unincorporated parts of the county, it's usually free market, which I loved. I actually love, because free market, it says I have to give you better service or you can leave me. When it's only one hauler and no choice, then, I just have to make a few councilmen and the city manager happy, right?
What you just said, by the way, is a perfect encapsulation, a perfect summary of why capitalism is better than socialism.
100%. Well, right. Right.
Remember the title of the book.
Right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
When there's one provider in a centralized economy,
That's right.
nobody cares.
That's right.
Right?
Now, I always wanted to give people great service when I had it. So I still treated my folks in the municipalities just like I would in the unincorporated. But philosophically, I always counseled counties to not go to the one hauler system.
Yeah.
To not bid it out. Just allow the free market. The cream will rise to the top. The rest will falter.
It is the nature of free enterprise.
That's right. Because I'm going to keep my trucks clean. I'm going to answer my phones. I'm going to take care of my customers better because I want to beat the other guy.
Right? Exactly. And it's the essence of the capitalist system.
That's right.
So having said that, much of what we talk about in this podcast and talking to business owners is the way that they bring their faith to work. Was that a component of what you did in that?
We did start to do it. We started to do it in the sanitation business again as my son was brought in. My son was brought in later on, so there's several years that I kind of cut my teeth in that business where it's just my wife and I. And then we had our son, and then my faith really started interacting with me more and more. So I'd bring guest speakers sometimes into the office, and we'd do some devotionals and things like that. Ultimately, there were times that I really started stretching my faith more and more, even towards the end of that venture. I can remember there's a great friend of mine does this Maximum Impact over in South Fulton. He was a business owner. They make all the containers for like 2-liter bottles for Cokes and things of this nature. These guys are big business.
Yes,
we might be third generation container guy. And Drew Sewell. Amazing guy. If you want, you should follow Drew Sewell online. And if you follow me, who are you? Just tell him that I sent you because he puts out only good things. But Drew is a really an interesting guy because when they built their major facility just on the west side of Atlanta, they walked around and poured oil around it. He's the guy when you walk in the office before every business meeting, he asks you to close your eyes, bow your head, and they pray. Whether you're a vendor or an insider or an outsider. And I thought that was really, I started seeing people like that in my later stages of faith. And I think I started interacting with faith and business more because of mentors like a guy like Drew Sewell.
And as a result, what kind of impact did that have on you? What kind of impact did that have on your business?
I hope that I became a kinder, slower Jason, because I can work at a very fast pace.
I can see that.
I can work at a very fast pace. Sometimes I talk at a fast pace. I can work at a fast pace, and sometimes I think at a fast pace. So if I can walk a little slower, that's where my faith kind of can quiet my ADD, a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I can work in prayer. Prayer, it really helps to calm me. If I stay closer in prayer, that helps to calm me, organize my thoughts, make better decisions about my responses. So that's the thing I would say would interact with my faith, and I hope that would come out with those employees.
I love that. Just kindness, consideration, and deliberation.
Right.
That's a beautiful way to kind of think about your role as an executive.
Don't always execute to this day that way. But when I'm better in prayer, I'm a humbler Jason's always a better Jason.
Exactly. I love that. Now, for business owners or managers in companies even that they don't own, we've talked to in the podcast here a number of folks who describe themselves as workplace ministers.
Sure.
And one of the key considerations here in 2025 is not offending your coworkers, not getting reported to HR.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about that. How do you navigate that from your experience in the sanitation company? Where if somebody says, "Hey, I'm Jewish," or "Listen, I'm facing east 5 times a day," and pray to Allah. How do you navigate that if you're a Christian business owner? What do you think?
So I actually think it's pretty simple, right? I think it's just loving on people no matter what. I think really that's simple. I don't think our faith has to be lived out super loud by our words. I think it needs to be lived out better by our actions. I have people, and I have people in my life all the time that I deal with that will tell me, "Oh, I'm so thankful that we met," but then they treat me not well. That's happened before in business plenty of times. Yeah. I'm 48 years old. I'm sure it'll happen again. Yeah. I want your actions to match up with your words. And usually in our faith, the loudest voices are the worst voices. So I feel like that in business, you don't have to worry about that. You have to worry about yourself and how you treat people really well. And the opportunities will happen. Because when you treat people really well, And there's this happiness in you that you don't allow all the other nonsense at work to come in. All the other drama, the work drama and all that stuff come in. And you just walk the halls being nice to everybody, treating everybody well. There will be opportunities and moments when people will say, I want to talk with you, get your advice about something. And that's when you've earned agency to share with them how great Jesus is.
I love that. I love that. Just create an environment.
100%.
And I was in the Navy. My dad was career Air Force. In the military, they describe what you just said as lead by example.
100%.
And I think of that for Christians, it's just you're shining the light of Christ so that folks can see it. And they'll be drawn to it.
Yeah, it's not me, it's him. It's always about him. And I think in society, people are starting to see it. I was watching Joe Rogan the other day. I don't watch a lot of podcasts because I produce a lot of podcasts. I'm in that world.
Exactly.
But I was watching him, and he talked openly. And there was a guy named Wes Huff. Wes Huff, I think if you don't know who he is, I tell your audience to Google Wes Huff. He's one of the probably one of the foremost theologians of our day. He's part of the Canadian apologetics movement.
Okay.
But his big thing is helping you feel really comfortable in knowing that the books of the Bible are true and what's in it you can believe and know because of the historicity of our faith.
Wow.
And so he discovers, he goes all the way back, and he's a linguist. He's got all this incredible knowledge, but he's like late 30s, early 40s, and he's good-looking kid and strapping, and so he's speaking to this generation. So it's not this 70-year-old stuffy theologian guy that only reads Coptic. You know what I mean? And he can, but he explains it. And he's on Rogan, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And Rogan made a comment that was so poignant because he said that it is true that if you live a Judeo-Christian life with those principles and values, that you will have a good life. And that works, right? You don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
But it does work. So people outside our faith are seeing it and asking questions. And again, I think that's why it's so important to just be your authentic self. You don't have to have church clothes and act like this. Let them see failures. Let them see successes. Let them see it all, but let them see your hope.
What does good life mean? You and I were talking about this in Paul's letter to Timothy, the foundation for life that really is life. You've had terrific success in business. I have had success in business, but I get the feeling that you would agree with me that has nothing to do with financial success.
100%. Yeah.
So what do you think the good life is?
I mean, happiness is up to you, right? Happiness is inside of you, and you have to make it a choice. There's been studies on happiness all across the country. Some of the happiest, or all across the planet, some of the happiest people are in squalors, and squalors, they have nothing, but they choose to be happy. And they choose to be happy with what they have. I've seen people at the highest levels. Wayne Huizinga, who did Blockbuster, he started Waste Management, and then he took it public, and then he started Blockbuster, which you got young viewers. Believe it or not, we used to have VCRs. We'd go to the store and we'd get a tape, and we'd have to put in something to watch a video.
We'd get in our car and drive it back to the house,
and the video might not even be available that day, right? But he started this concept. It's defunct now, totally went bankrupt, but he took it public and made a ton of money off that, went on and did other things. And he wrote a book called Blockbuster. In the book, he talks about regret and that he gave up his family, right? And he didn't know Jesus. He came to know Jesus later in life. And in that book, he doesn't even talk about Jesus. It's later in other testimonials that it comes out that Wayne did accept Jesus as his Savior. His son actually found Christ after addictions and problems and all of these things, and went and reconciled with his father and wanted to tell his father about Jesus. And he was like, this is what I was missing my whole life.
Wow.
Right? And isn't it a shame? Everybody wants to talk about eternity. I'm excited about seeing my in-laws again. I'm excited about seeing my grandparents again. I'm excited about seeing those people that I've lost. I'm excited about seeing my Savior's face and fully being known and fully being healed from ADD and anxiety and all these other things that come along with living this world. But I love this moment in time with Jesus and trying to make heaven here on earth.
Heaven here on earth.
That's
so
right.
We talk about this all the time in Bible study at home, the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And some people have come to me and said, man, I love what you're doing. You're building the kingdom of heaven. But a lot of people think of the kingdom of heaven is up there. What do you think the kingdom of heaven is?
Ultimately, Scripture seems to point to me that, right, heaven's not going to be our final destination anyway. Jesus is going to make a new heaven, new earth, right?
The Alpha and the Omega.
So there is going to be something where we're all combined together, right? But right here, I think having heaven on earth is sharing, again, the journey with Jesus is a conversation. It's a constant conversation every day. I equate it to kind of my wife, who she and I work all the time together. I mean, we work together. She is the smartest person I know. She is the person with the most integrity I know. And she has the most healthy boundaries of any person I know.
That's great.
And so if I didn't have her in our business, I'd have to replace her with like 15 other people. She is that good, right?
Yeah.
But but I work with her and we talk all the time because we are in constant communication in our business dealings and in our ventures together. And the fact that our kids are all basically out of the house. I have one left. We deal a lot more. But that's how the conversation with Jesus should be. However, we kind of pocket them. Open it up on Sundays, open it up on Wednesdays, open it up when, I had a guest on the other day said that there's no atheists in the foxholes. So we open it up when we're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Right? But we're not having that conversation. We're not always. Look, I actually don't want to beat anybody up. I'm the same way. I'm saying it out loud to myself. The more I'm in constant communication with him, the more I'm in that relationship with him, the better I'm at in all my relationships, which is heaven here.
I love that.
Yeah.
So when we were sitting down this morning, I mentioned today is our wedding anniversary.
I know. Congratulations.
Thank you. For those of you who are listening or watching this episode, today's June 6th, 2025. Rebecca and I are delighted to be celebrating our 27th wedding anniversary today. We met at church in 1996 in November. I was walking in a little late, and she, in hindsight, completely unusually was late too. She's a very, very punctual person. But we went to a church in Atlanta, St. Philip's Cathedral, that had giant wooden doors. So I haul this wooden door open and see if I need to hold it to anybody, and there's Rebecca. And so when I think of that Greek word Kyrie, Christ with us, I think of that moment.
Yeah, you do. I mean, the heavens open. It's like,
exactly. Now, it took a little work. I ended up right in line behind her for coffee in the fellowship hall afterwards, and I don't even drink coffee.
There you go. So you had this.
But having said that, everything you just said about Danielle is exactly what I think about Rebecca. Having a great partner in life makes everything go well, whether you have a business that you own together or multiple businesses or raising a family. How do you, as a dad and a husband, integrate your faith into your family life? Because to me, that is the source of all the other things that we've been talking about. The pie chart investments, the business dealings that we have, our podcasts. How do you do that?
My family is my number one priority. It really is. And I don't know. I know people say, well, isn't Jesus first? I mean, I could say that. I get it, but that I think the family unit is so important to Jesus. I think where his heart is, I also want to be, and my family is so important. The older I get, I realize that everything else was really just fodder. And it's easy to say I'm doing this for my family, but are you? Right?
Yeah,
so there's things I have to kind of check myself, and my wife does a really good job of holding me accountable in that world. But that is probably also one of the hardest things to navigate, right? Because you care so much, and you want everybody to make a decision. And the one thing I wanted with my faith and my children's faith, I want it to be their own. Because I also realize that if it's my faith, it'll never stick. Yeah. If it's their faith, then it's got a chance. Yeah. And so we constantly, lots of conversations with our kids, lots of conversations about all the hard things. There are many times my son would walk into the room and say something that he heard from school, and my initial reaction is like, gasp, don't ever say that again, we're not talking about it.
Right.
But I had to overcome those things and sit down and say, okay, well, let's talk. Look, this is what they mean. This isn't something that you would do outside of a marital relationship, or whatever it is. It's just, what do you think about it? How do you think? What comes to your mind? So asking questions, having a lot of conversations, leaving space for them to discover their faith themselves. We did for a long time. We homeschooled our children, and we did when I stopped doing church, we home churched them too. Yeah. So we would watch like North Point online. We get the songs, we get Andy Stanley's messages, and then afterwards, though, they give like 3 or 4 points to talk about after the sermon.
Yeah.
So we would eat a big breakfast at the house, and we'd sit around and we'd talk about those questions.
I love that.
And we did that a lot of times in the formal years of our children versus a corporate church, which I get is also critically important. But for our family and for those moments, I'm thankful and grateful for those home churches.
Isn't that wonderful? But Jason, what the hell do you know?
That's right.
Sorry,
that's right.
I did that just so you took a sip of water.
That's so great. That was great. That's great. I love it.
So you got a podcast. What the hell do I know? Tell us a little bit about it.
So I started it for my kids. I wanted to leave them a legacy. Entrepreneur, had all this different experience, come across all these incredible different people. And over time, I would say things to them about thinking this way or doing things this way. And I think during those teen and tween years, a lot of it is like, okay, whatever, Dad. You see the eyes roll, right?
Sure. And
I would say, look, do it, don't do it. What the hell do I know? And so eventually this podcast idea came up. After doing the church, I had lots of, I don't want to say lots of people, like people knocking on my door, but it was constant nagging of kind of like, well, are you going to start another church? Are you going to do something else? Are you going to do this? And I said, I don't know. I don't really want to go into all that. So I said, I don't want it to be necessarily faith, although we definitely dive into faith all the time. And it seems like each episode I'm bringing more and more faith into it. But that was the idea, is that I bring life stories from people I know and how they can impact your lives. Our audience, too, is, I say 85% of our audience is 18 to 44.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's called What the Hell Do I Know with JB. And nobody really ever called me JB growing up. I get more and more people. I did it to myself. More and more people call me JB now on the street. But my closest friends call me JB. Mm-hmm. So that's why I call it What the Hell Do I Know with JB.
With JB.
That's right.
So so you're talking about, it sounds like you're just talking about life.
Yeah, to a large part, really it's human stories. I love the testimonies. Revelation said we're saved by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimonies. Obviously, I know Jesus saves us. It's the only way, right? And it's his sacrifice on the cross and his resurrection from the grave that gives me my salvation, and that is my hope. And however, the word of our testimonies is what points to the cross, right?
Right.
So I think that's why Revelation says that.
Well, and so what? But it sounds like you've got folks there telling their stories that may not even be Christian.
There are plenty of folks, I'm sure, that have come on that don't necessarily interact with faith, and that's fine. There are folks that come on that many of them do. I've had folks that have had $1,000 a day drug habits on my show. I've had folks that have come on from cancer. I just had a cancer survivor that's coming on this Tuesday that I'm really grateful to hear her testimony. I had a mother that started West Inwood Ranch with autism that came on, and that was incredible.
Man.
Lindy Wood.
Yeah.
She's incredible. I've had the Emerald Coast Children's Advocacy Center come on and share their heart with Julie Porterfield. And so there are many, many different folks. I've had the sheriff come on with Michael Atkinson, and now he is full of faith, and he goes deep into it. And probably the most, no offense to any other guest I've ever had, but he is probably the most well-read person I've had on my podcast. He was amazing. Sheriff Atkinson is an amazing. I was glad to give him my vote previously. We've been in the Emerald Coast 9 years. He's been my sheriff all 9. Mm-hmm. I was glad to give him my vote and have given him my vote. But now I'm proud to give him my vote.
Wow. Now that you had a chance to talk to him.
That's how good.
Isn't that cool?
That's how good.
So What the Hell Do I Know with JB?
Yeah.
It's on YouTube and all the channels.
Everywhere you get your podcasts. Yeah.
You and I have only known each other about a month.
Yeah.
What do you think would attribute the really rapid success of the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably helped that I lived a life in Atlanta and I lived a life here, and so there's a lot of people on social media that are there. I used to do a speaking tour in Portugal as well, and so there's I've had the opportunity to pour into some folks, and so I think it probably helped to have a little bit of a presence online. Although it was not, I do more and more online now that I'm doing this podcast than I even did before. So that probably helped. I would say hopefully it's the authenticity. I'd like to think we're getting better and better. I'm hoping it's the authenticity and the authenticity of the guests. I want to bring those stories out. I want to draw out the importance of leaning into faith. I want to draw out how to be a better father, how to be a better husband, how to even be a better mother, how to be a better believer when I'm dealing with somebody in cancer. I mean, that's one of the things we explored in that podcast was you're going through cancers, and sometimes Christians, we can be the most generous people in the world, but we can stumble over our, we use all these Christianese like, well, God's going to do a mighty work in you. Well, I had a friend came on, broke his neck, and that's what Christians used to tell him is that God's going to do a mighty work in you. And he took it as like, oh my goodness, like what, like all this pressure on his life that now I'm walking again. I can't just be a normal person. I have to be a big, beautiful Christian person, and really ultimately, no, he just needed to love the people he's around really well in his circle. Love others, love Jesus and love others. That's all I needed to do. So sometimes we say things as Christians. We don't hear how that comes out to that person that's in that moment. So we explore those. If you're on my podcast and you are a believer, I'm going to stretch your faith. And if you're an unbeliever, I hope I stretch your unbelief.
I love that. You mentioned earlier as we were talking about kids and raising kids, it's just you want to have a happy and relationship with Jesus. Rebecca and I say happy and healthy. It includes a relationship with Jesus.
100%. Yeah.
Let's get back to happiness.
Yeah.
Part of the book, at the very end, we talk about a podcast called the Happiness Podcast.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of this?
I've never heard of it, but I want to check it out.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
It's great. There was an episode at Thanksgiving a couple of years ago that I cite to in the book because this social scientist who runs the Happiness Podcast brings in another social scientist, and they've done a study. And the study involved two groups of people. One group of people, both groups are given money. One group of people goes out and shops and buys stuff for themselves. The other group of people takes the money and gives it to others. Mm-hmm. And they found that a vast majority, like a significant difference, the group of people who gave the money away was happier.
Yeah, sure.
But the social study didn't conclude why.
I mean, it's because Jesus said it, right? It's better to give than receive.
Yes, and part of our theory is we're made in God's image to work.
Sure.
We're made in God's image to give.
Sure.
And so the reason we as people love to give, it makes us happy, is that's how God made us.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about generosity and giving.
Sure.
What kind of examples have you seen, either in your family, in your business, of generosity as a result of success in business, or in the church that you started?
Sure. So I've got a couple. My father-in-law, we kind of retired him out, he was still kind of a figure in our business early on, right? So we would have this end of the year party, Christmas party. And every year, when I first came in, some of the managers, I watched them kind of give my father-in-law a gift, my mother-in-law a gift. So they might give her a nice bag from some store or whatever. Actually, Coors wasn't around. So I don't know, whatever the bags are. I don't know all the bags, right? And they might give my father like a leather jacket. I remember one time because he had just started learning how to be a private pilot. So they gave him like a nice private pilot's jacket. And that was all great, And he was thankful for all those gifts. But I actually knew his heart and how he loved to really help other people. And so when I started getting more agency in the organization, because my father-in-law didn't just say, hey, you're going to come on and you're going to be the guy,
you
right?
had to earn it.
Yeah, so I had to work through. And so eventually I worked in the VP and then CEO of the company. So I was probably around the VP world or just under that, but I was a manager and I had agency. And I told the group, I said, look, we're going to stop giving my father-in-law and mother-in-law anything because they don't need anything. And they were constantly struggling to find the things that they wanted, and everybody would give a little bit of their money. And I said, no, we're still going to give money, but we're now going to go to the church and we're going to find families that don't have stuff for the kids for Christmas. And we're going to do Christmas. And so that year we found two families. We got their Christmas lift. We all went and bought all the kids, everything those kids needed for Christmas. And then I met my father-in-law and took him to those families to deliver the gifts. And that we did it in honor of him.
Wow.
For them. And that was really expressive in our business. And I just remember tears rolling down his face. I never really saw him crying. But he was like, this is the best gift I've ever been given. I always hated, and he was like, I always hated the leather jackets and stuff. Just felt too much, and I didn't need it, and I didn't want it, but I was gracious in it. But like, this is so cool, and he just loved that. So yeah, that was really a moment in time that I loved. And then the other thing, I think, giving doesn't have to be it can be your time too. When I first started diving into ministry, I was leading a new member class. And in fact, preparing for this memory keeps pouring into me. But I was leading a new member class. And in it, people would come in saying, I want to be a member. And the idea was to lift you up and help you understand the tenets of the gospel. Make sure we're all clear on those kind of core things, right? Then there'd be the non-essential things like how we're supposed to serve and tithe and do all those things. And then put you in a place like that you can serve in the church, and where your talent is and where you could be. And maybe it's in the kids, maybe it's holding a door, maybe it's, whatever, right? I had a guy come in one of my first classes I did, and his name was Jackie. And he came in, it's one of these people you could tell from a mile away that had lived a life really hard,
Yeah.
And ultimately he told me I had nailed it. He had lived a life really hard.
You called it.
And he had come in as a prodigal son. But he told me that he wanted to live, but he had the cancer, and it's all over his body. Mm-hmm. And he had come back into the house to live with his dad. His dad's not a believer. His stepmom's not a believer. It's a divorced home. His mom didn't have a great relationship with it. He barely had a great relationship with his dad. And his dad let him come back into his house. He didn't have a relationship with his brothers and his sisters and his siblings. He had ruined everything in his life, but that no matter what, he was going to live for Jesus till his last dying breath.
Wow.
Every day, which I thought was radical because I came to this podcast today. Today, I'm shooting this podcast. I've got to go by the studio. I'm getting a haircut. I'm meeting an old friend. None of it's about living for Jesus. But that's how he saw his day. Yeah. Jackie died shortly thereafter. He didn't live forever. But I was there with him every day doing devotionals. And at the end, his family called me to the home as they had no money. And we're in talking like 1,200, 1,300 square foot home. They had done the best they could with it. And I'm standing in this room while his mother is in bed with him, holding him. And his father and his stepmother are there, and his siblings are there. And you're seeing the presence of the Holy Spirit as he is then taken to heaven. And as this broken family of unbelievers is praying to Jesus over their son, going to heaven in a moment of time. So
that's the kingdom of heaven right there in that room.
That's giving. Yeah. That's giving. Yeah. Right? And those are the moments that change you. Those are the moments that when I think about like how can we give to others, that's giving. Your life, your thoughts, your ideas. I mean, this is a cat that had gave it all away, didn't do anything, and then in the later part of his life, and his dad to this day, he just called me like 5 months ago, knowing I'm here in Florida, he's still in Atlanta, going to that church, still going to the church with that stepmom and all. And they're still trying to, living a different life, all because their son came home, but he came home because he knew Jesus. Something in his life had changed, and they saw that change.
I love that. He gave them the gift of the good news.
That's exactly right. There's no greater gift.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one gets me every time.
Let me tell you something. Yeah. Your haircut may not be about Jesus, but that story is.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, man, I'm so glad we got a chance to spend time together today. Our signature question is, what does it mean to you to be a Christian capitalist? What are your thoughts on that after we've spoken this morning?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, so I think what's funny is that I would have people in my life that would be more left-leaning, possibly, that would go, that is so oxymoronic to say Christian capitalist. They're opposed, right? And then I would have people that may be more right-leaning that would be like, oh, totally get it, totally have it, I'm totally on. And I would argue that Jesus doesn't really operate in those worlds, right? He reorientates it. And he said this in John 13, Jesus, when he goes through, he's washing the disciples' feet, and he's trying to express to them how he's not going to be there anymore. And it's always funny. It's like they don't get it. They just don't get it. And it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard for people right now to understand the Trinity. And it's hard for people to understand this eternal life and the sacrifice that Jesus did and that God did. And I love the book of John, by the way, because every chapter talks about the deity of Christ, right? Yeah. And in fact, if you're listening today, I'm telling you, read John 13. Just read it. Read the whole book of John, but read John 13. It'll take you like 5 minutes to read. But it's such a great chapter. But in it, he kind of says, look here, a new commandment I give you. Which I think is very funny because if you remember in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he talks a little bit about the greatest commandment is, and it comes from kind of Deuteronomy, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. The second is like it, love others yourself. Jesus, though, says in John 13, says, look, a new command I give you. Just as I've loved you, love others. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And then, in fact, he says that they will know you by your love.
Yeah.
Right? They'll know you by your love.
Yeah.
And I really think, when I think about Christian capitalists, that's what I think, right? I'm in on that. If I'm building capital, I'm going to use that. That love capital is the best capital you'll ever build.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Just listen, I'm right there with you. A lot of people are blue. A lot of people are red.
No, I get
this
your
whole
point.
thing is green.
I love
I
love the title. I think it takes people, pulls them different ways, and it evokes something. So I love it. I love it because I know your heart.
But exactly, because
right.
It's all about, hey, wait a second, guys. Neither of these things is bad as long as you do good.
100%.
You know?
I agree.
I'm so glad you joined us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Honored to have you. And everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. Jason Becker, don't forget to check out What the Hell Do I Know?
That's right.
JV out there on the podcast channels. And don't forget to check us out. The link below gives you a link tree to get to all our social media and the other podcast episodes, and as well a link to go buy this book so you can read more about the Word of God and how it informs us to work hard and give generously to the poor and needy. I'm Rick Sanders with the Christian Capitalist Podcast, where the more we make,